I made a mistake picking my husband. It's disgusting. What do I do? I sat on the edge of the bed, one hand gently resting on my growing belly, feeling the flutter of life within me. At 10 weeks pregnant, I should have been overjoyed, filled with anticipation and hope for the future. Instead, a deep sense of dread and anxiety weighed heavily on my heart. The man I had married nearly 2 years ago, once my best friend and partner in fun, had become the source of my deepest misery. Our small cluttered apartment felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in on me, a stark contrast to the vibrant, successful life I had once led. Before meeting James, I was a thriving healthcare executive with a beautiful home I owned, a bustling social life, and the freedom to enjoy spontaneous trips and elegant events. But now, all of that seemed like a distant memory, a life belonging to someone else. James and I had started out strong, our days filled with laughter and companionship. Despite a few quirks that I didn't love, I believed no one was perfect and saw the best in him. However, as time passed, his true nature began to reveal itself. James became increasingly paranoid and controlling, his irrational jealousy and frequent outbursts of anger turning our home into a battleground. He hadn't worked in over a year and a half, and his constant suspicions about my fidelity left me feeling isolated and emotionally drained. The final straw came during a local veterans event. Already feeling nauseous from my pregnancy, I had hoped for a peaceful afternoon. Instead, James insisted on driving by the event multiple times, blasting music and revving his car engine obnoxiously. He found it amusing, laughing maniacally as he disrupted the solemn gathering. My embarrassment turned to horror as I realized this was just another display of his increasingly erratic behavior. His disrespect and callousness towards others had reached a new low. My mental health had been deteriorating under the constant stress. I was no longer allowed to wear certain clothes, and any interaction with colleagues was met with accusations and tantrums. James had even made me quit jobs because he believed everyone I worked with was trying to sleep with me, despite my profession involving mostly female colleagues. The career I had worked so hard to build was crumbling, and I was financially struggling, unable to maintain the lifestyle I once had. In the midst of this turmoil, a glimmer of hope came from my step-sibling in Colorado. She had offered me a place to stay in her rental, a chance to escape and start anew. The thought of leaving James terrified me, but staying felt even more unbearable. I knew I had to protect my unborn child and myself from the toxic environment that had consumed our lives. Before meeting James, my life was a picture of success and happiness. I was living in a beautiful, spacious home that I had worked hard to purchase. As a healthcare executive, my career was thriving. I managed a team of dedicated professionals, and each day brought new challenges and achievements. My work was fulfilling, and I found joy in helping others and making a difference in my field. Outside of work, my life was equally rich and rewarding. I had a close-knit group of friends with whom I shared countless memories. We would often gather for dinners, celebrate milestones, and take spontaneous trips. Hosting elegant events was something I loved. My home was often filled with laughter, good food, and the warmth of friendship. I also enjoyed traveling, exploring new places, and experiencing different cultures. These adventures added a vibrant tapestry to my life, making it all the more exciting and fulfilling. One evening, at a friend's party, I met James. He was charming, witty, and full of life. We quickly connected over our shared interests and spent the evening talking and laughing. There was an immediate spark between us, and by the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers and made plans to see each other again. Our early days of dating were filled with fun and spontaneity. James had a way of making even the simplest moments feel magical. We went on adventurous dates, tried new restaurants, and spent lazy weekends exploring the city. He was attentive and thoughtful, always finding ways to make me feel special. We quickly became inseparable, and it wasn't long before he moved in with me. Despite his quirks, which I noticed but didn't fully comprehend at the time, our relationship seemed perfect. He had a few habits that I didn't love, like his occasional outbursts of paranoia or his discomfort with some of my male colleagues, but I brushed these off as minor flaws. After all, no one is perfect, and I was in love. James made me laugh, and I enjoyed his company immensely. His affection and the fun we had together overshadowed any doubts I might have had. A year into our relationship, James proposed. It was a beautiful, intimate moment that took place during a weekend getaway to the mountains. Surrounded by the serene beauty of nature, he got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. Overwhelmed with joy and love, I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was a small, joyous affair with close friends and family, a day filled with love and happiness. In the early months of our marriage, things were good. We continued to enjoy our time together, and James seemed to support my career and friendships. However, subtle changes began to creep in. He started to express more dissatisfaction with my work, hinting that I spent too much time there. He would make offhand comments about my friends, suggesting they weren't really my friends or didn't have my best interests at heart. I dismissed these as his way of looking out for me. But as time went on, his behavior became more controlling and erratic. The fun-loving man I had fallen in love with started to show a darker side. He lost his job and, instead of looking for a new one, became increasingly dependent on me. He began insisting that we move frequently, citing various reasons that never quite made sense. Each move took me further away from my support system and deeper into isolation. James's jealousy and paranoia grew worse. He accused me of infidelity without any basis and made me quit my job because he thought my colleagues were trying to seduce me. His suspicions were baseless and hurtful, but I was caught in a cycle of trying to prove my loyalty and love to him. The vibrant career I had once built was now stagnating, and my social life had all but vanished. The gradual unveiling of James's true nature was a slow and painful process. In the beginning, his quirks seemed almost endearing. He was protective, which I mistook for caring. However, what started as minor oddities quickly morphed into alarming behavior. One of the first major incidents occurred about 6 months into our marriage. We were looking at a house to rent, hoping to find a place that felt more like a home. The landlord was a friendly man who mentioned that the yard was large and he could have someone come by to help take care of it if we didn't want to manage it ourselves. James's face darkened immediately, and he became uncharacteristically quiet. When we got back to the car, he exploded, accusing the landlord of making lewd insinuations about his genitals and implying that he was offering to take care of me. I was stunned. The conversation with the landlord had been entirely innocent, but James was convinced otherwise. We had a huge argument, and it was the first time I saw just how irrational his paranoia could be. As months passed, his paranoia only intensified. James insisted that we move frequently, claiming he was unhappy with our neighbors or that the area was unsafe. In reality, he was convinced that people were spying on us, or that my male colleagues were following me home. We moved 15 times in 2 years, crossing 9 states. Each move was more disruptive than the last, making it nearly impossible for me to maintain any semblance of stability in my career. He made me quit several jobs because he believed my colleagues, predominantly female, were trying to seduce me. The stress of constant relocation and job changes was taking a severe toll on my professional life. James's control extended to every aspect of my life. He decided what I wore, who I spoke to, and even what I did in my spare time. He scrutinized my social media accounts, reading too much into innocent interactions. If I laughed at a message from a friend, he would demand to know why and accuse me of flirting. My wardrobe became increasingly conservative at his insistence, and I gradually lost touch with friends who couldn't understand why I was distancing myself. One particularly painful incident occurred when I reconnected with an old friend, Sarah, whom I had known since college. We decided to meet for coffee after not seeing each other for years. When I mentioned this to James, he flew into a rage, accusing Sarah of trying to rekindle a romantic relationship with me. His accusations were baseless and absurd, but the fight that followed was vicious. He forbade me from meeting her, and in my desperate attempt to keep the peace, I canceled our plans. Sarah never understood my sudden coldness, and another friendship slipped away. Financial control was another weapon in James's arsenal. Despite not working, he demanded we live a lifestyle that required us to buy designer clothes and expensive jewelry. He insisted on purchasing luxury items for himself, yet refused to help with necessary expenses, like fixing my car window that had been broken for over a year. When his car had issues, it became my responsibility to find a mechanic and ensure it was repaired immediately. My savings dwindled as I tried to keep up with his demands, and financial strain became another, a layer of the oppressive life I was leading. The emotional and psychological toll of James's behavior was devastating. I became a shadow of my former self, constantly walking on eggshells to avoid triggering his anger. The man who had once made me laugh and feel loved was now someone I feared. My mental health deteriorated rapidly. Anxiety and depression became my constant companions. I lost weight, struggled with insomnia, and felt a pervasive sense of hopelessness. One of the darkest periods was when James's behavior took an even more sinister turn. He began using derogatory language towards others, including calling people racial slurs and mocking those with disabilities. His blatant disrespect and cruelty were horrifying, and I felt trapped in a nightmare. His actions were no longer just affecting me but also reflecting a deep-seated hatred and bigotry that I couldn't comprehend. The final straw came during a local veterans event. Already feeling nauseous from my pregnancy, I had hoped for a peaceful afternoon. Instead, James insisted on driving by the event multiple times, blasting music and revving his car engine obnoxiously. He found it amusing, laughing maniacally as he disrupted the solemn gathering. My embarrassment turned to horror as I realized this was just another display of his increasingly erratic behavior. His disrespect and callousness towards others had reached a new low, James's disregard for my well-being became increasingly apparent as my pregnancy progressed. He would leave bottles of urine in our bedroom despite the bathroom being just a few steps away, making the entire room smell foul. His burping and farting, despite knowing how nauseous I was, felt like intentional provocations. If I vomited, he would get angry, blaming me for being weak. Every day was a struggle to maintain any sense of normalcy while dealing with his constant cruelty and lack of consideration. The realization that I needed to leave became clearer with each passing day. I knew I had to protect my unborn child and myself from the toxic environment that James had created. The once vibrant and successful woman I had been was now a shadow. But I held on to a glimmer of hope that I could reclaim my life. In my darkest moments, my step-sibling in Colorado became my beacon of hope. She had offered me a place to stay, a chance to escape and start anew. The thought of leaving terrified me, but staying felt even more unbearable. With each argument, each insult, and each demeaning act, my resolve strengthened. I knew I had to find a way out, to protect my baby and reclaim the life I had lost. The day started like any other, with me feeling the familiar weight of dread as I woke up beside James. He had been in a foul mood all morning, muttering under his breath about imagined slights from our neighbors. As the hours dragged on, I clung to the hope that attending the local veterans event might offer a brief respite from his relentless negativity. I needed to get out of the house, to breathe fresh air and perhaps find a moment of peace amidst the chaos that my life had become. As we drove to the event, I tried to keep my nausea in check, focusing on the thought of being outside and around other people. But James's mood only darkened as we neared the gathering. "Look at these idiots," he sneered, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "They think they're so great, all proud of their service. I'll show them." I glanced at him horrified. "James, please, let's just go and have a nice time. We don't need to make a scene." But my words fell on deaf ears. As we approached the event, he turned up the music, blasting it so loudly that the car windows vibrated. He revved the engine aggressively, attracting the stares of those gathered in respectful silence. My heart sank. This was a solemn occasion, meant to honor those who had served, and James was turning it into a spectacle. We drove by once, twice, and each time his laughter grew louder, more manic. He reveled in the disruption he was causing, completely oblivious to the disapproving looks and the whispered comments. I felt a deep sense of shame wash over me. This was the man I had married, the father of my unborn child, and his behavior was appalling. As we passed the event for the third time, I couldn't take it anymore. "James, stop," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "You're embarrassing me and you're being incredibly disrespectful. Just stop it." He looked at me with a sneer. "Oh, so now you're taking their side, typical, always so eager to defend everyone else but me." I felt a knot in my stomach, a mix of fear and anger. How had it come to this? How had the man I once loved turned into someone so cruel, so irrational? As we drove away, the sound of the blaring music still ringing in my ears, I knew something had to change. Back at home, James continued his tirade, pacing the living room and hurling insults. I retreated to the bedroom, closing the door behind me and sinking onto the bed. My hands instinctively cradled my belly, and I felt a rush of protectiveness for the life growing inside me. I couldn't let this be my child's reality. I couldn't let them grow up in an environment filled with anger, paranoia, and hatred. As I sat there, the events of the day replaying in my mind, a sense of clarity began to form. I thought about my step-sibling's offer, the chance to start anew in Colorado. It was a lifeline, a way out of this nightmare. The fear of leaving, of the unknown, had kept me paralyzed for so long. But now the fear of staying was even greater. I couldn't subject my child to this toxicity. I couldn't continue to let James's behavior erode my sense of self-worth and happiness. My internal dialogue became a torrent of resolve. I had been strong once. I had built a successful career, maintained meaningful friendships, and lived a life of joy and fulfillment. That woman was still inside me, buried under layers of fear and pain, but she was there. I owed it to myself, and to my unborn child, to find her again. With trembling hands I reached for my phone and sent a message to my step-sibling. "I need to get out. Can you still take me in?" The response came almost immediately. "Of course, just let me know when you're coming. We'll get everything ready for you." Relief washed over me, mingling with a newfound determination. I began to make plans, carefully and quietly. I gathered important documents, set aside some money, and thought about the logistics of leaving without alerting James. It would be difficult, but I had to do it. For my sake and for my baby's future. That night, as I lay beside James, his snores filling the room, I felt a sense of calm for the first time in months. I had a plan. I had a way out. And soon, I would be free. With the decision to leave firmly planted in my mind, I knew I had to proceed carefully and methodically. James's paranoia meant that any hint of my plans could lead to a volatile situation. I had to act without raising his suspicions, which required meticulous planning and steely resolve. The first step was to gather the essentials. Over the next few days, I discreetly collected important documents. My birth certificate, passport, and bank statements. I packed a small bag with clothes, toiletries and a few personal items, hiding it at the back of my closet. I knew I couldn't take much, but I needed enough to get me through the initial days of my escape. Financial preparation was another critical aspect. James controlled our finances tightly, scrutinizing every expenditure. I had to be strategic about setting aside money without him noticing. I started paying for groceries with cash and pocketing small amounts of change each time. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I also opened a secret bank account online, transferring small sums whenever I could. One evening, when James was absorbed in a particularly intense online conspiracy theory, I took the opportunity to call my step-sibling, Lisa. She had always been a source of support, and I knew she would help me without question. Lisa, I whispered into the phone, my heart pounding. I need to leave. Can you still take me in? Of course, she replied without hesitation. Just tell me when and how I can help. We discussed the logistics in hushed tones, ensuring James couldn't overhear. Lisa lived in Colorado, several states away from our current home. The plan was for me to leave in the early morning while James was still asleep. Lisa would book me a train ticket under her name to avoid a paper trail. We decided on a date 2 weeks from now, giving me enough time to finalize my preparations without arousing suspicion. As the departure day approached, my anxiety grew. The emotional challenges of leaving an abusive relationship are immense. Despite the fear and pain James caused me, there was still a part of me that remembered the man I had fallen in love with. The memories of our early days together, filled with laughter and affection, tugged at my heart. Leaving meant accepting that those days were gone and that the man I loved no longer existed in the same way. Fear was my constant companion during those days. What if James discovered my plan? What if he reacted violently? The thought of his unpredictable rage kept me on edge. I had to remind myself that the fear of staying was greater. My unborn child deserved a safe, loving environment, and I couldn't provide that if I remained trapped in this toxic relationship. I also feared the unknown. I had built a life, albeit a strained and unhappy one, with James. Starting over in a new place, far from everything familiar, was daunting. Would I be able to find a job? Would I be able to support myself and my child? These questions haunted me, but I knew I had to take the leap of faith. Lisa's unwavering support gave me the strength to face these fears. The night before I planned to leave was one of the longest of my life. I barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. I kept replaying my escape plan in my head, ensuring I hadn't missed any details. I had left a note for James, carefully worded to explain my departure without provoking his anger. It was a delicate balance, trying to convey my feelings and reasons without inciting further harm. When the morning finally came, I moved silently through the house, my heart pounding in my chest. I took one last look at the life I was leaving behind. The oppressive weight of the past years hung heavily in the air, but I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in a long while. I gently placed my note on the kitchen table and picked up my small bag. As I slipped out of the house, the first light of dawn breaking on the horizon, a sense of liberation washed over me. I walked to the end of the street, where a taxi was waiting to take me to the train station. Each step felt surreal, as if I were moving through a dream. The fear and anxiety were still there, but they were now accompanied by a sense of determination and hope. The train ride to Colorado was a blur of emotions. I alternated between fear and relief, my mind filled with thoughts of the future. Lisa met me at the station with open arms, and as she hugged me tightly, I felt a sense of safety and love that I had longed for. The journey was far from over, but I had taken the most important step. I had reclaimed my life and my future. With Lisa's support and the promise of a fresh start, I felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Leaving James was the hardest decision I had ever made, but it was also the most necessary. For my child and for myself, I was determined to build a new life filled with hope, safety, and love. As the taxi pulled away, I looked back at the house one last time. A flood of conflicting emotions washed over me. This had been my home, a place that once held so much promise and love. Now, it felt like a prison I was finally escaping. I forced myself to look forward, reminding myself that this was the first step toward a new life. The drive to the train station was uneventful, but my nerves were on edge. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting James to appear out of nowhere. Each passing car made my heart race, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. When we finally reached the station, I paid the driver and hurried inside, trying to blend in with the early morning crowd. The train station was bustling, and I was grateful for the anonymity it provided. I checked my ticket one last time, making sure everything was in order. Lisa had booked the ticket under her name, a precaution to keep James from tracking me. I found a quiet corner to wait, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The train would take me halfway across the country, to a new state, a new life. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. As the train pulled out of the station, I settled into my seat and let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. The rhythmic clatter of the tracks was oddly soothing, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. The fear of being discovered still lingered, but with each mile that passed, it began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of determination. The journey was long, and the hours seemed to stretch endlessly. I tried to distract myself with a book, but my mind kept wandering back to James. Was he awake yet? Had he found my note? How would he react? I couldn't let myself dwell on these questions. I needed to focus on the future, on the new life I was about to start. The landscape outside the window changed as we traveled west, the familiar surroundings of my old life giving way to the vast open spaces of the Midwest. The change in scenery mirrored my internal transformation. I was leaving behind the chaos and fear, moving toward a fresh start and new opportunities. When the train finally arrived in Colorado, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Lisa was waiting for me at the station, her face a beacon of comfort in the sea of unfamiliar faces. As soon as I saw her, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. I rushed into her arms, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt safe. "Welcome home," Lisa said softly, holding me tight. Her words brought tears to my eyes. I had a long way to go, but I was finally on the right path. Lisa's home was a modest but cozy rental in a quiet neighborhood. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic life I had left behind, and I felt an immediate sense of peace. Lisa had gone out of her way to make me feel welcome, preparing a comfortable room for me and ensuring I had everything I needed. Her support was a lifeline, and I was deeply grateful. The first few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I was relieved to be free from James's control, but the reality of starting over was daunting. I had to find a job, rebuild my financial stability, and create a safe environment for my unborn child. Lisa was a constant source of encouragement, helping me navigate the transition and offering practical advice. She introduced me to her friends, and I slowly began to build a new social network. Despite the initial challenges, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. I had taken control of my life, and each small victory reinforced my determination. Finding a job was a priority, and with Lisa's help I updated my resume and started applying for positions. The healthcare industry in Colorado was thriving, and I was hopeful that my experience would open doors. Adjusting to my new surroundings took time. There were moments of doubt and fear, but each day brought new opportunities and a sense of progress. Lisa's unwavering support made all the difference. She was always there to listen, to offer a shoulder to cry on, and to celebrate my successes, no matter how small. One of the most challenging aspects was dealing with the emotional aftermath of my relationship with James. The scars he had left were deep, and healing would take time. I started seeing a therapist, someone Lisa had recommended, to help me process the trauma and rebuild my self-esteem. The sessions were difficult but necessary, and I gradually began to feel more like myself again. As the weeks turned into months, I found a new rhythm. I secured a job at a local healthcare facility, a position that offered stability and a sense of purpose. My colleagues were kind and supportive, and I felt a renewed passion for my work. My financial situation improved, and I was able to save money and plan for my baby's arrival. The journey to Colorado had been the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most empowering. I had reclaimed my life, and with Lisa's support, I was building a future filled with hope and possibility. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but I was ready to face them. For my child and for myself, I was determined to create a life filled with love, safety, and happiness. As I settled into my new life in Colorado, I often found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The path I had taken was fraught with pain and fear, but it had also been a catalyst for profound growth and self-discovery. Leaving James had been the hardest decision of my life, but it was also the most empowering. It forced me to confront my deepest fears and rediscover the strength and resilience I had always possessed. In the quiet moments, I thought about the life I had before James and how different it was from the turmoil of the past few years. I remembered the vibrant, confident woman who had thrived in her career, cherished her friendships, and embraced life with enthusiasm. That woman had been buried under layers of fear and doubt, but she was still there, waiting to be reclaimed. The lessons I learned during this journey were invaluable. I learned the importance of trusting my instincts and recognizing red flags early on. I understood the necessity of setting boundaries and protecting my emotional and physical well-being. Most importantly, I realized that I deserved happiness and respect, not the constant barrage of suspicion and control that had characterized my marriage. Emotional healing was a gradual process. My therapy sessions were instrumental in helping me unpack the trauma and rebuild my self-esteem. Each session brought new insights, helping me to understand the patterns of abuse and how to break free from them. I learned to forgive myself for the times I had doubted my worth, and to embrace the journey of self-discovery with compassion. Rediscovering my self-worth was a journey in itself. I started by setting small, achievable goals that reinforced my sense of competence and independence. Securing a job in the healthcare industry was a significant milestone. It not only provided financial stability but also reaffirmed my professional capabilities and passion for my work. I began to reconnect with old hobbies and interests, finding joy in the simple pleasures of life that I had once taken for granted. As I prepared for the arrival of my baby, my focus shifted to the future. I was determined to create a positive, nurturing environment for my child, free from the toxic dynamics that had marred my past. I wanted to be a role model of strength, independence, and resilience. This meant continuing to prioritize my mental health, building a supportive network of friends and family, and fostering a home filled with love and respect. I also made plans to ensure my independence. I saved diligently, invested in my professional development, and explored opportunities for further education and career advancement. My goal was to provide a stable, secure future for my child, one where we could both thrive. Looking back, I was proud of the progress I had made. The journey had been arduous, but it had also been a testament to my strength and determination. I had reclaimed my life, and with each passing day, I felt more empowered and hopeful. The future was no longer a source of fear but a canvas of endless possibilities. In the end, my journey was not just about escaping an abusive relationship. It was about rediscovering myself and embracing the life I deserved. With my child by my side and a supportive community around me, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. My story was one of resilience, growth, and the unwavering belief that I could and would create a brighter, happier future. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.